Hi, everyone. This is Maria Feekes, and I'm here with a phenomenal guest, Aaron Bastuba. Aaron Bastuba is in California, in San Diego. Hi, Aaron.
Hello.
Yes, hello. And Aaron is with the Fertility Center of California. It's a team that I feel like I have known already for quite a few years. We have been always very happy with everything that they do. Cannot say enough of great words about the team. But today, specifically, we want to talk about a very narrow subject. They do many, many things, right? But I wanted Aaron to be with us to talk about a phenomenal methodology in the test that they're doing in the lab. It's gender selection. Okay. And Aaron is actually the lab supervisor. So he had been leading this whole process, testing it out, doing, the studies before releasing it. And now finally it's released, correct, Aaron?
It is.
Well, wonderful. So let's jump in. I would like, yes, so let's talk about gender selection, okay? And specifically, we're talking about gender selection, guys, from the sperm perspective, not from testing embryo, right? Well, kind of walk us through. So you are one step before that.
We are one step before it. So, just as a little bit of a background, we had a gender selection process called the Erickson Method, and this is a process that's well documented on the internet. And what we were able to determine was with the Erickson Method, we had around a 70% success rate, regardless if we were selecting for male or female chromosome carrying sperm. It hovered right around 70% when that sample was used with IUI. And that's fine and dandy. But now the IVF process has become, a process that's used more and more frequently for individuals. When the Erickson method was used with the IVF process, we weren't getting the same success rates. So that was problematic. It's problematic for the individuals who are undergoing that gender selection and then subsequently with the IVF cycle. We want the success rates to really carry through, regardless of if it's an IUI or an IVF cycle. So we did some digging. And one morning I came across this new method, and this new method is documented, it's on the web, it's the Cornell method for gender selection. And I thought that it was interesting because not only did they perform the gender selection method, but they also followed it up with FISH, the fluorescent in situ hybridization testing of the embryos following the gender selection. So to just back that up a moment, we would do the gender selection with the Cornell, or Cornell did their gender selection method. Then they use that gender selected sperm for an IVF cycle. And then they tested all of the embryos that resulted from, the unification of the gender selected sperm and the oocytes. And what they published was an 80% success rate.
Which is huge.
That is much greater than the success rates that we were seeing with our Erickson method being united with IVF. I mean, it was
And it
going.
was possible for IVF, like you said, because Erickson method, you said, not only the data that you were getting was less that you're getting right now, but it was more consistent with IUI method.
It was, and IVF is, I don't know what the national statistics are, but I know that here in San Diego, there are many IVF centers, and I feel like IVF's being used more than IUI is, but people can, look that up through ASRM and determine what those actual rates are. But I know that we want to be able to offer gender selection for our IVF patients as well.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So in essence, what we're trying to achieve, guys, so when we're talking about that, we are one step before testing with pre-implantation genetic testing, meaning that, if you just take sperm, correct, Aaron, and it doesn't go through any kind of additional testing, before being used in insemination, fertilization of oocytes in IVF process, for example, right, in creation of embryos, then there is no control of what kind of embryos will be created, right? So then families only could do the testing afterwards, right? If gender selection is important to them. And it could be just it could be just illustration. Okay, so you have, let's say, 5 embryos. Out of those 5 embryos, we see that 4 are boys and 1 is girl, hypothetically, right? There is nothing that you could influence. It's all whatever was happening, that's how it happened, right? Now, sometimes it could be all girls, sometimes it could be all boys. And so what to do if that's, if your goal was opposite from your results? So the idea of a gender selection on a semen level, right? It comes where, and Aaron, maybe you will explain a little bit more just about methodology, like what does it mean? How do you select? Because like does semen look differently? Is it a machine that selects it, or how is that pre-selection done, right? But literally, whatever sperm then is being used from, after the method was used, the Cornell method in this case, then you're going to have 80% chances, right, that the gender of your particular goal, right? I don't want to say like choice, the goal will be preserved. Did I describe it correctly? So it's not just the saying the results, it's actually impacting the results in some way as well.
We want the results to speak for themselves. It's
Right.
one thing to say that you have a gender selection method that is 70% successful. But if that success rate doesn't translate to the gender that you're seeing in the embryos that were created, then what good is the success rate?
Absolutely.
We don't want the
Absolutely.
success rate to be an arbitrary number. We want it to hold value. So what we do is the same thing that Cornell did. First, to say that our results were not the same as Cornell's results. When we were doing our internal results, they are somewhat different. But we're still proud of our results, and they are well beyond 50% success rate. The gender selection process itself, we use different media. So media is a liquid. We use different liquids to separate the sperm, and they're able to separate sperm based on their density.
Mm-hmm.
So just by differing densities, that allows us to separate sperm based on what chromosome they're carrying.
Mm-hmm.
So this was something that was devised by Cornell, and we essentially just expanded on it. The Cornell method in the paper is fairly specific, but it is not a complete procedure. So we had to introduce certain steps in the procedure that allowed us to finish it, really. We wanted to obviously obtain motile sperm, and we want to obtain enough motile sperm so that sample could be used for IUI or IVF, because not
Mm-hmm.
everybody's going to be doing IUI and not everybody's going to be doing IVF. So we want to be able to serve the largest number of patients possible. So we had to put certain changes into the protocol that allowed for that to happen.
This is
Now,
excellent. This is
yeah, the
excellent.
protocol that is listed, we are still using that protocol, but just we went a little bit further. But
Mm-hmm.
something interesting happened. And with Cornell's method, they took their gender selected sample and they ran it through FISH. So they took a small portion of the gender selected sample and they hybridized it with specialized probes that would illuminate special colors, which was the color that they would illuminate was dependent on if they were carrying an X or a Y chromosome. And
Mm-hmm.
we did that here in the lab. We bought a fish scope, we got all the probes, and our staff was able to learn a new technique. And we found with the females, when we're selecting for females, we have an over 80% success rate.
Wow.
So consistently, when we're selecting for females, yeah, we are over 80%. What that means is that when we take a portion of the gender selected sample and we put it underneath the microscope and we label it with the probes, more than 80% of the sperm that we see have an X chromosome. That's
Wow,
how we know that the gender selection was a success for females, because we literally see the sperm that we selected for.
unbelievable.
When we did that for males, we're finding that it's around 65%.
Interesting.
So on average, the split, roughly is 50-50. In most samples for males, 50% of the sperm that's produced has an X chromosome, 50% of the sperm that's produced has a Y chromosome. When we gender select, as I mentioned, the female for female, now the sperm that we gender selected for, more than 80% has X. When we did it for male, we are finding that around 65% has the Y or the male chromosome.
Hmm.
Cornell states 80%. We have not been able to achieve that yet. We're trying
Okay.
to follow the method as close as we can, but have not been able to achieve that 80% mark.
For the
And
male.
they were able to achieve this consistently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doubting their data. I'm merely saying that we have not been able to replicate their success rates.
No, 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 and absolutely. And like you said, it's not about the doubt, but it's really about the methodology and perfecting because, now you have, the equipment, you have the media, you have the steps. So all of those things matters. And I really like that you're stressing consistency. It's not like, hurrah, we just done it once, right? We need to make sure that your whole lab is able to, operate with those consistent parameters. But even the numbers that you're sharing, I think it's extremely, I mean, it's so impressive, right? It's because otherwise, without that methodology, it's more like a guess, and there is absolutely no influence. um I want to ask you a little bit about ethics, okay? Because someone that could be listening, they could be saying, well, this is really unethical to do those choices, right? So by no means I want to say that, myself, Maria, or, Aaron, and, Fertility Center of California advocating for a particular gender selection, right? It's really not about that. There is actually, it's more coming, from what is important for the families, right? And the families could have, specific situations where the gender is important, right? So it's all coming from those perspective. There also could be, I know we had some cases where there was, in family line, there was some genetic condition, right, that was passed, let's say, through males, okay?
Mhm.
And the only way for them to have the healthy child was to ensure that they're using only female embryos, right? So this family, particular family that I'm having in mind, they actually came before the methodology existed. So I remember them going through many steps of rounds of embryo creation with the donor oocytes. That was also important for their process. And was one round after another. Then they would do PGD testing, right? Pre-implantation genetic testing, and say, okay, not a single girl. Boom. Next, not a single girl. So like this is insanity for your budget, and this also could be considered, unethical, because what do you do then, right? Like what happens with all of those number of embryos? So I think it's really not about advocating for that, but it's saying, when there is a situation when family is trying to make a decision, right, that is important for them, how could we assist it? But it also comes with some other additional ethical, I think, protection, right? So in the United States, you shared something that it cannot be, gender selection cannot be just used across the board. So what is the stipulation that is being used?
For gender selection right now, at the sperm level, I'm not aware of any legislation here in California that prohibits gender selection.
I heard that you can have it, but only, and maybe I'll research. So thank you for bringing it up. But I heard it that you can only do gender selection if you already have at least one child.
That may be the case in some states, but I'm not aware of that being the case in California, because the reproductive laws here in this state are um, some of the most liberal, really, probably in the world. So we have a lot of freedom when it comes to the types of methodologies that we employ to help patients.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not aware of, yeah, there. any legislation that has been created that bars us from
Okay.
gender selection.
Okay, well, this is very nice to know. So this is also some consideration for the families. Okay, great. Yes, and then I guess the last question that I have, and I promise it's going to be super short because Aaron is so busy. Their team, I visited them. They guys, they slam. They are working. I don't think that they even have time for break. Um, if anyone is interested, what are the steps? Okay, and is it the method for any sperm, or there is some limitations as far as the need to be of particular parameters. You don't need to share them, but perhaps families also know that first there needs to be, I don't know, semen collection analysis, anything like that. So would you share how to get process going in case someone says, yes, I wanna get on with it?
Sure. So the best way is through a lab order from a doctor.
Okay.
Uh, we can provide lab orders if you meet with one of our providers, and there would be an additional fee for that. But if you're able to obtain a lab order from your provider, your doctor, then that's the quickest way.
Okay.
The limitations. We want to make sure that there's enough motile sperm for whatever reproductive procedure the patient's going to be undergoing. So if they're going to be undergoing IUI, then we really want about 70 million total motile sperm to
Mm-hmm.
start. That's a
Mm-hmm.
high number, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what we're looking for because we want there to be, after the gender selection has been performed, 5 to 10 million motile sperm for the IUI.
Okay.
Start
Okay.
off 70 million, then we should be able to achieve the 5 to 10 million total motile sperm for the IUI itself.
Okay. And if the family is going for IVF, are the numbers a little bit going down? Would you accept with less million motile sperm?
Much lower. So as long as the IVF facility is used to working with um, cryptozoospermia, very low sperm numbers. If they can work with very low sperm numbers, and really as long as there's a million total motile sperm, I believe that couple's going to be good to go.
Okay.
We can perform the gender selection on anything. The question is, how much motile sperm
Do
is
you
going to
need?
be left after the gender selection has been performed?
Okay. Okay.
We're usually left with 5 to 10% of the total motile sperm count
Uh-huh. 5
we
to
began with.
10%. That's very important to know. Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I am so excited that you were able to, I don't want to say replicate, but implement the method. And now, I don't even know how many labs are doing, but I know that you've been doing it, and so many clinics are actually coming to you. So this is really exciting, and hopefully more and more families could be learning about that, asking their doctors as well, right? Is this an option for them? And then contacting you. But we will definitely provide the link to your team in the video, under the video, and then everything could be start from there. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Maria. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Aaron.